Australian dollar is buying 94 US cents, 70 euro cents and 59 pence sterling.
For more on finance, we're joined by Rod North, Executive Director at Bourse Communications. Rod, good to see you as always. And
good morning.
You were saying you're quite impressed with Maurice Newman's
yes.
sort of views of the world.
Look, I think it's interesting when you hear someone who's prepared to, say what a lot of people are actually thinking, but not prepared to say themselves. And I think, sort of looking back over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, I thought he made some really interesting comments about, how effective, the government was, having a minority government, and, how sort of destabilising that was. And then also sort of looking at sort of industry and what we can do, and particularly focusing on sort of wages as well, and what's happening in that sort of space, which is creating, a lot of difficulty with a lot of businesses in sort of getting ahead, because that impost of, very high wages and all the things that are associated with that create sort of a whole lot of issues for particularly new businesses, wanting to employ people. So I think it perhaps makes people think, let's bring it back onto the table for sort of further discussion about, what issues can be addressed there.
Well, even the government's moved very quickly to nip this in the bud. Christopher Pyne was saying he in no way, and the government in no way endorses an attack on the minimum wage in Australia.
Well, that's exactly right. And I mean, to me, that's really saying, well, let's not talk about it. I mean, I think it needs to be on the table, because I think if you speak to businesses, both big and small, this is a real issue. And when you've got, particularly sort of leaders of industry, prepared to come out and comment, I think you've got to draw both government and opposition.
Let's put on the table, a lot of people would like to see also on that table, if the minimum wage was put there, executive salaries at the other end of the pay range.
Absolutely.
Which are obscenely large.
Couldn't agree with you more. And I think, if you focus on industries in particular like banks that are, recording massive profits, and the remuneration at that level, certainly needs to be reviewed, and it's got to be, consistent with, delivering growth, delivering performance, key performance indicators that justify, those enormous salaries at the other end. So, yeah,
because there seems to be this growing disconnect, Rod, and it's borne out in some of the issues that you wanted to talk about this morning, between the rich, who seem to be getting richer and richer, not just in Australia, but in America classically, middle class disappearing, young. I mean, the housing approval stats tell a story where people are just not going to be able to buy their own home.
That's exactly right. And I mean, when we saw those figures come out yesterday, home loan approvals up 4.4%, but when you drill down, only 12% of that, increase is actually for, first home buyers, and that's the lowest level ever recorded. And also, I mean, those figures are September figures. Look at October and November are probably going to be no different. They will be increases as well. And virtually what it's saying is that, home loan affordability for young people and first home buyers, just isn't there at the moment. That's another issue, that we've got to look, very closely at, because it's fine to have, cash rates at the lowest levels ever. I suppose the sort of flip side there is that in some ways it keeps sort of credit under control, because a lot of first home buyers, have a tendency perhaps to sort of overgear those.
But don't you think it's also a statement of how hot the market is for investors, and all the deals that are there for investors, changes to the regulations that are flooding in foreign money again, and shutting out first home buyers?
That's right. And I mean, I think also the issue of how a lot of people are buying property now in their super funds, people who can afford to buy property, pushing the prices up, which really makes it sort of very difficult and unaffordable for first home buyers. So it's creating massive problems, I think, at the moment, and I can't see how that's going to change in the short term, to be quite honest.
All right, good to talk to you, sir. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Now, coming up, we'll talk to the ABC's Kerry O'Brien about his fascinating